I knew my marriage was over the second my wife slid the folder across the table and said, "Just sign it, Adrian. It's cleaner this way." She smiled when she said it. Soft, careful, almost kind. That smile is what stayed with me, not the papers. Not the pen she had already placed perfectly toward my right hand. Just that smile. The kind people wear when they think the ending has already been agreed to. My name is Adrian Voss, 43 years old, founder and CEO of Veradon Capital. From the outside, I had everything people like to envy. The penthouse, the money, the sort of silence success buys when no one dares ask what it costs to keep it. From the inside, my wife and her family had been quietly deciding what would still be mine once they were done with me. And before I tell you how I let Elise believe I was about to sign away my company, my home, and the last clean version of my name, stay with me. Because by the time she pushed those papers across the table, the real ending had already begun. 3 weeks earlier, everything still looked normal from a distance. Elise still played the part beautifully. Late-night conversations, soft touches on my shoulder. The kind of affection that feels real if you don't stop long enough to ask why it only appears when something important is about to move. That was the part I missed at first, not the affection itself, the timing. Elise had a gift for making attention feel like comfort. She knew how to listen without seeming strategic. How to ask a question that felt intimate when it was really precise. How to stand beside you long enough that you stopped noticing which parts of yourself had become visible to her. That's probably why it took me so long to understand what was happening. Because betrayal rarely arrives looking ugly. Sometimes it arrives polished, patient, beautifully spoken. There had been small signs for months. A sudden interest in which assets sat in my name and which were protected by holding structures. Questions about succession language she had never cared about before. Daphne bringing up trusts over dinner as if estate law were a normal part of family conversation. Chloe joking that women married to men like me should ask for hazard pay. Everyone laughed, including me. That's the humiliating thing about hindsight. It doesn't just show you the truth. It shows you how many times the truth stood in front of you and waited while you kept choosing the kinder explanation. At first, I gave them all one. Daphne was intrusive by nature. Chloe was spoiled and mistook sharpness for intelligence. Elise was probably tired of being married to a man whose mind was always somewhere half a step ahead of the room. That was the story I told myself. Intelligent people are sometimes the easiest people to fool. Not because they can't see, because they can explain almost anything once they decide they'd rather preserve peace than test what they already suspect. Then came the lunch. It was a Tuesday, private restaurant, back room, the kind of place powerful people choose when they want privacy to feel accidental. I wasn't supposed to be there. A meeting had moved. I stopped by to collect a document packet from someone on the board side and was heading back out when I heard Elise laugh. Not the laugh she used with me. This one was lighter, sharper, a little careless in the way people get when they think the room is closed around them. I stopped in the hallway. Daphne was with her, and Chloe. I couldn't see them yet, but I didn't need to. Daphne's voice carried first. If he signs before quarter close, the rest gets easier. Chloe laughed. He will. Adrian hates looking difficult. Then Elise, calm as still water, said the sentence that ended the marriage before the divorce papers ever touched the table. He trusts me. That's his weakness. I stood there with one hand on the brass edge of the service door and felt something inside me go very still. No anger, no scene, no disbelief, just clarity. The kind that arrives so cleanly it almost feels impersonal. I turned around, walked out of the restaurant, and went straight back to the office. That night, I stopped trying to preserve the version of my life that only existed because I kept refusing to call it by its real name. I didn't confront Elise. That would have been a mistake. People like her prepare for anger. They know how to absorb it, redirect it, call it instability, use it as proof of the story they were already building. What they don't always know how to survive is precision. So I got precise. By the next morning, every vulnerable structure inside Veridon had been reviewed. Dormant voting protections were activated. Personal exposure points were moved behind independent review. My outside counsel had sealed instructions. 2 board directors I still trusted received copies of documents Elise didn't know existed. And the most important part? I left the rest exactly where she expected to find it. The visible paths, the accessible files. The assumption that I was too tired, too private, too distracted to notice what was being arranged around me. For 2 weeks, I let the illusion breathe. I signed small things, routine things, harmless things. I let Elise believe I was worn down. Let Chloe make her little remarks about predictable men and control. Let Daphne perform concern in that refined tone women like her use when what they really mean is acquisition with manners. And while they relaxed, every late-night call, every forwarded draft, every access point they thought was invisible was being logged. They thought they were approaching a finish line. They never understood they were already inside the evidence. Then came the dinner. The penthouse looked almost offensively beautiful that night. The city was gold below us. The table was set with the wedding china we almost never used. Elise wore dark blue silk and the expression of a woman prepared to be admired for the grace of what she was about to do. There are few things colder than an elegant betrayal. We ate half the meal before she set her fork down and looked at me with what anyone else would have called sadness. "Adrian," she said, "I don't think we can keep living like this." I let the silence settle. Then I asked, "Like what?" She lowered her eyes for a moment, perfectly judged. "Like strangers," she said. "Like everything in this marriage belongs to your world and I just orbit it." It was well constructed. Enough truth inside it to let the lie travel. She kept going. "You work too much. You shut me out. You hide too much. I'm exhausted. I need peace. I don't want this to get ugly." Then she slid the folder across the table. Neat tabs, marked pages, a pen already waiting. "Just sign it," she said. "It's fair. It's respectful." I looked at the folder, then at her, then at the pen, and for one brief second, I saw it. That small flicker in her eyes. Victory, arriving too early. I picked up the pen, signed, then turned the folder around and slid it back to her. She frowned and started reading. Her face changed in stages. First, confusion, then concentration, then something colder. Because what she was looking at was not a divorce settlement. It was a receipt, a formal record of asset protection, a notice of legal review, a timeline of coordinated activity, metadata tied to documents she thought had disappeared, a flagged invoice from the restaurant, security corridor footage, access records. Communications linked to outside counsel preparing marital extraction under false emotional framing. Not everything, just enough. Clean proof is always more frightening than dramatic proof. It doesn't need emotion to make its point. Elise looked up slowly. "What is this?" I leaned back in my chair. "The part you didn't plan for." For the first time all evening, she lost control of her face. Not guilt, not shame, disorientation. Like she had stepped into a room she thought she understood and found the architecture changed. You went through my things? No, I said calmly. I stopped protecting yours. She stood too quickly, anger arriving where control had been. You're humiliating me. I looked at her for a long moment. No, I'm interrupting you. That landed, because it was true. She had mistaken uninterrupted strategy for intelligence. Mistaken secrecy for control. Mistaken my silence for blindness. And now, the room no longer belonged to her version of the story. She tried once more. The softer voice, the wounded tone, the quiet disbelief. This didn't have to become ugly. I held her gaze. It already was, I said. You just thought I was the only one still calling it a marriage. That was the line that ended it. Not legally, but everywhere else. You can feel it when the last version of a story dies in a room. It leaves behind a very specific kind of silence. A minute later, the doorbell rang. She turned toward the foyer. My attorney, I said, and 2 independent directors from the board. That was when she finally understood. She hadn't trapped me. I had simply let her walk all the way to the center of the trap she built. The next 10 days moved quickly, cleaner than Daphne could interfere with, too clean for Chloe to joke about, too documented for Elise to charm her way around. Her access was revoked first, then her leverage disappeared. Then, the narrative she had been preparing collapsed under the weight of records she never imagined I had already secured. Daphne called. Twice. Then again. One voicemail pretending this could still be handled like family. That was almost impressive. There is a certain kind of person who believes blood, marriage, and polished tone should survive any amount of calculation. Chloe sent one message. You didn't have to ruin her life over paperwork. I read it once and deleted it. People who confuse the consequences of their own choices with cruelty rarely deserve a reply. And me? I went back to work. Not with triumph, not even with relief exactly. Just with the strange quiet that follows a long, private distortion finally becoming visible. In the end, Elise lost more than the divorce. She lost the version of the story where I was the man she had already figured out. And I lost something too. Not the company, not the penthouse, not even the marriage, if I'm being honest. What I lost was the last excuse I had for not naming what it had already become. Maybe that was the hardest part. Not the betrayal itself, just the quiet realization that some things end long before anyone says them out loud. If you stayed with me until the end, tell me this. What hurts more? Being betrayed by someone you loved? Or realizing how long you kept trying to call it love after it had already become strategy? I'll see you in the next story.